Welcome to ceramics. If you're watching this, it's probably because your counselor added you to the course a little bit late, or you transferred or switched your schedule. No matter what the circumstance is, you're welcome in this class. I'm going to show you around the studio, show you a couple of the safety things you're going to need to know, some of the stuff we covered at the beginning of the class, and then at the end, your counselor will actually give you a little post-test to make sure you have all the really important information before you come join us in ceramics. So at the end of every day, whether you throw or you're trimming pots, it's important to make sure you clean your wheel. And not only just your wheel, but all of the tools associated with that. So as you can see on this wheel, there's a couple of different parts. This is the wheel head, part that spins. This is what we are calling the tray, and that protects you from getting splashed when you're throwing, but it also collects little bits of clay as you're trimming or throwing. And then this is the table in front of the wheel head. So the first thing I do, whether it's really wet clay or trimming, is I pick up all of the big chunks, I put them on a bat, and you can use one of your rib tools to scrape it off if it's not coming off easily. Then you carefully take the tray off, and you get any of the big chunks of clay and have those all together. This clay can actually be recycled, and we'll put it in the recycled clay bin over by the clay mixing room. But until then, I'm just going to set it on the table so that I can clean the rest of the wheel. So before I even go to the sink, because there's usually a long line at the sinks, I like to just take my bucket of water and do as much of the cleaning at my wheel as possible. So first I'll do the tray, and then if the tray is actually all the way clean, you can actually put it back. One thing about putting these trays back on, there's cleats underneath that hold them in, and a lot of people will put them on top, which makes it really loose when you're throwing. So make sure it actually slides into the proper attachment so that it doesn't wiggle around. Next, I'm going to clean the wheel head. I'm going to use a large sponge and some water to do that. And I'll put all of my tools in my bucket. And I'll clean the table or the working area in front of the wheel head. So when you get done cleaning your wheel, you should have a clean tray, a clean wheel head, a clean working area, and a clean bucket with clean tools. Notice I'm using the word clean a lot. One of my biggest pet peeves is when people say their wheels are clean and then after they leave for class I find copious number of tools left in the bucket, just totally dirty, or a wheel that's left a mess. Now that I've showed you that, I would like to go over some of the tool names because you might have missed that, because you missed the beginning of the class. Obviously we have a large sponge, good for cleaning, good for smoothing the inside of large pots. We have small sponges. Those are used for getting the sides of your pots wet, smoothing things out. You can also throw with these, and I will show you how to do that later. We have our wire tool. These are used for cutting things off the wheel. We have a needle tool or probe. These are very, very sharp, so please be careful when you're working with them. These are used for carving the clay, trimming the lips off of our pots, scratching and attaching handles and other things. This is a really, really useful tool. And these tend to get lost a lot, so make sure they get back in your bucket after you clean them. This is a trimming tool. If you do any work in a kitchen, you might recognize it as a core for coring pears. It's actually the exact same thing, but we use it for trimming the bottom of our pieces. And then here we have a couple different ribs. We have a wooden rib and a rubber rib. These are really good for cleaning your wheel. These are good for smoothing out the edges of pots. And the rubber ribs are particularly good at shaping the inside of bowls. They do a really nice job of smoothing bowls out. And then obviously your bucket. So there's a couple important things that happen at the front of the room. First, when I'm giving my brilliant lectures, they happen in this general vicinity. Also, if you are on sinks, and you'll find out what that means in a moment, your name will be listed here. So you can see I have first, seventh, second, and sixth period listed. And we just go in alphabetical order, and 2 students per day are in charge of cleaning the sinks after the class is over. The other important thing that's at the front of the room is the bat cave. And the bat cave is where the bats live, and the bats are the pieces of wood that we put our projects on. So after you get done throwing on the wheel, if I say, go to the bat cave, it means I need you to go get a bat. So this is the area where you're going to turn in your projects once they're done, and you'll notice that the cards are labeled with what period you're in. So if you're in first period, this is the card that you're going to go on. You'll also notice that on many of the signs I have, did you put your name on your work? The reason I have that is because a lot of students think that I'm a super teacher, which I am, but they think that I can remember each individual pot of my 225 students. So if you would help me out by making sure that your pot either has your full name written on the bottom or your initials and period number, so that I can find you and give you all the points for all the hard work that you're doing. So these cards are located back here. Please do not put your own work into the kilns unless I've specifically asked you to do that. Lots of the times I'm using different firing techniques in these kilns, and if you put your pot into one kiln that's actually being fired a different way, then it can sometimes make your pot explode, or it can hurt other people's pots. So please just put them on the cart and let me load the kilns. We're outside on this beautiful sunny day to show you the outside kiln area, and I promise it's always sunshine when you're bringing your kilns outside. It never rains on you as you run out here. That's a lie. All right, so this is the cart you're gonna put your glazed work on after it's been glazed, and there's actually a video, if you missed the demo on glazing, we have a video about glazing your pots. But once they are glazed, you put them out here. Please do not put them on the kiln yourself. I have a method to my madness of how I load the kiln, and it really annoys me when people think that their work is more important than everybody else's and they just shove it on the kiln without getting permission first. So put it out here, and I promise I'll get them fired as quickly as possible. If we ever have a fire drill or another emergency and we have to leave the building for any reason, you're gonna come out the main ceramic door through these gates and actually walk this way to the rock. My only thing about this is it seems like it would be self-explanatory, but please stay off of the street when we're walking to the rock. I know it's a easy access if you just run around the cars, but if there was an emergency, this is where fire trucks are gonna come in, so we need to stay off the roads and just walk quietly out to the rock. This is the rock where we will meet with the other people from the Team H buildings for fire drills. Once we get here, if you could work with your classmates to line up in alphabetical order by last name, so that I can quickly take attendance. I know that seems monotonous for when it's just a drill, but when it's an actual emergency, we want to make sure that you're all out of the building and safe, because I love you. So make sure you get into alphabetical order by last name. Over by the clay mixing room, you'll see these big gray bins full of gross clay. It also has past projects that students have decided that they didn't want, or they broke while they were working on them. We try to recycle all the clay possible in the studio, so if you have a chunk of clay either from the wheel or a past project and you don't want to fire it, it can go in here, we'll dissolve the clay back down and recycle it, and it'll be a lot greener for everybody involved. As long as your clay hasn't been fired, you can have it recycled. So even if it's bone dry, I think there's one in here, even if it's a super bone dry, brittle piece of clay, it can still be recycled as long as it hasn't gone through any of the firing process. It can also be super wet, sticky clay, and we can recycle that too. So part of your job as a ceramics member of this studio is taking care of the space. We have a really nice space, but there's a lot of cleaning that needs to happen, and so we try to spread it out so that everybody's helping each other out. No matter where you're cleaning, whether it's a sink or your wheel or the tables, one of the main reasons we clean is to keep down the level of clay dust. If you take this class every term until you graduate, you're probably not going to get any of the negative effects that are associated with high levels of clay dust. However, somebody who's in the studio all of the time and breathing in all of the clay dust can suffer some of the consequences. And so for my health and safety and for some of the other students who are here for multiple terms, it's really a good idea if we can keep the clay dust level down and also just make it a better, easier place to work. One of the reasons that we clean the sinks at the end of every class is because if the clay dries out on the sinks, it's a lot harder to clean. So we also don't want it accumulating so that the last class of the day or just one person is responsible for cleaning it. So just make sure at the end of every class period, if you're on sinks, that the sinks look really good. So this is an example of a dirty sink, and the way we're gonna clean it is first we're gonna get all of the clay out. So instead of pushing it towards a drain, I usually push it into the corners. And then you're gonna scoop out all of this clay. And while we try to recycle most of the clay, this clay, we don't know what's in it. It could have stuff other than clay in it, so we're actually gonna throw this away. Of course, If there's huge pieces of clay, then you can go ahead and recycle them because you can tell that it's just a big piece. So one thing people always forget to do is clean their tools and put them back on their wheel. So I try to save as much water as possible by just washing them with the water in my bucket. And after I get the majority of clay off, I'll put them in the sink so I can give them a final rinse. This also makes it really nice for the next person who uses your tools to get clean tools. It's really, really frustrating when you come into work and you're ready to work and then all of your tools and your wheel are super dirty. If it's your own studio at home, you can do whatever you want, but here we have to actually clean up and share the space and be good community members. Now I'm going to turn the water on. I'm going to wash all of the clay off the bucket, inside and out. So it looks nice and clean. Then I'll give my tools one final rinse. Make sure you wring the water out of your sponge so that you don't have a lot of water sitting in the bucket. And then we're gonna go put these back on our wheel. So that's a brief tour of all the things around the class that you might have missed, transferring in a little bit late. Don't forget to check in with the accountant and pay your lab fee. And if you're on free and reduced, you still need to check in with her, but you won't be required to pay a lab fee. Also get your sketchbook and we'll see you out in ceramics.